They don't pay $30 an hour for nothing. That's what I kept telling myself as I pulled into the gravel lot of Coyote Fuel and Go. My headlights swept across the weathered sign, the neon coyote flickering like it couldn't decide whether to stay lit or surrender to the darkness. The station sat alone on Highway 160, a solitary outpost in the vast emptiness of the Navajo Nation. Red rock mesas loomed in the distance, their silhouettes barely visible against the night sky. I killed the engine of my beat-up Civic and sat for a moment, listening to the tick of cooling metal. The desert night pressed against my windows, a living, breathing thing. Out here, 30 miles from the nearest town, darkness had weight, substance. My phone buzzed. Danny. "Hey, little brother," I answered, forcing cheer into my voice. "Miggs? You at work?" His voice sounded clearer than it had in months. Rehab was doing him good. "Just got here, first night. How you holding up?" "Better. Group therapy today. Talked about, the stuff with the car." My stomach tightened. "Danny, no, it's good. I'm owning my shit. That's what they say here." He paused. "You didn't have to take this job, Miggs. Not for me." I watched a moth batter itself against the fluorescent lights above the gas pumps. "It's good money. Besides, how hard can it be to run a register and watch people pump gas? In the middle of nowhere? At night?" Danny's laugh was brittle. "Just be careful, okay?" "Always am. Talk tomorrow?" After hanging up, I grabbed my backpack and stepped out into the night. The air smelled of dust and gasoline, with something else underneath, something metallic and strange. Heat still radiated from the asphalt despite the late hour. August in Arizona never really cooled, just became slightly less punishing after sunset. The bell above the door jingled as I entered. The interior was exactly what you'd expect. Linoleum floors worn thin by decades of boots, shelves stocked with beef jerky and energy drinks, a coffee station that had seen better days. A dusty boombox on the counter played classic rock, the volume low enough that it was more texture than sound. "You must be Miguel." I turned to find a man emerging from the back room. Hank Yazzie looked exactly like his voice had sounded on the phone, weathered, substantial, with deep creases around his eyes that suggested he'd spent a lifetime squinting into the sun. His silver hair was pulled back in a short ponytail, and turquoise stones gleamed at his wrists. "Call me Miggs," I said, extending my hand. His grip was dry and firm. Hank. Owner, manager, and sometimes janitor. He gestured around. "Welcome to Coyote Fuel and Go. Not much to look at, but it pays the bills. Thanks for the opportunity. Not many places hiring at this wage." Something flickered across Hank's face too quick to read. "Well, night shift's not for everyone. Last 3 guys quit within a week." "Their loss," I said, with more confidence than I felt. Hank nodded toward the bulletproof booth behind the register. "You'll work from in there. Door locks automatically at 10 p.m. After that, all transactions happen through the drawer." The booth looked like a relic from another era, its glass webbed with fine cracks. A stool, register, and small desk fan occupied the cramped space. Not exactly comfortable, but it would do. "Training's pretty straightforward," Hank continued, leading me behind the counter. "Register's old but reliable. Gas pumps need to be authorized from here." He pointed to a panel of switches. "Security cameras cover the pumps and store. Panic button under the counter calls the tribal police, but they're about 40 minutes out, so don't panic," I offered. He didn't smile. "There are rules here, Miggs." "Important ones." I nodded, suddenly aware of the weight in his voice. "First, never sell jerky, tobacco, or Slim Jims to anyone with yellow eyes." I waited for the punchline. It didn't come. "Yellow eyes," I repeated. "Like jaundice?" "You'll know it when you see it." Hank's expression remained deadly serious. "Second, if the pumps start leaking black fluid, not gas, something darker, lock the doors immediately and play track 3 on that boombox. Don't stop it until the leaking stops." I glanced at the ancient cassette player. What's on track 3? A chant. Old Navajo prayer. He waved away my question. And third, most important, never answer the payphone. He pointed to a faded blue payphone mounted on the wall near the bathrooms. It looked like it hadn't been used since the 90s. Does it even work? I asked. It shouldn't, Hank said flatly. Any questions? A dozen, but something in his expression warned me not to ask them. No, sir. No jerky for yellow eyes. Play track 3 for black leaks. Ignore the phone. Got it. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. Good. I'll be back at dawn to relieve you. Emergency numbers are by the register. Cell service is spotty out here, so don't count on it. After a cursory tour of the stockroom and bathroom, Hank headed for the door. He paused with his hand on the frame. One more thing. Between 2 and 4 a.m. things can get strange. Just follow the rules, and you'll be fine. Before I could ask what he meant, he was gone, the bell jingling in his wake. Through the windows, I watched his pickup disappear down the highway, taillights swallowed by darkness. And just like that, I was alone. The first few hours passed uneventfully. I familiarized myself with the register, organized the candy rack, and scrolled through my phone until the signal finally gave out. By midnight, I'd had exactly 2 customers, a local woman buying cigarettes and a bleary-eyed college kid filling up his tank on the way to Flagstaff. At 1:30 a.m., the bell jingled. A trucker built like a refrigerator lumbered in, his arms decorated with faded tattoos. A rattlesnake curled around his forearm, its diamond pattern disappearing under his sleeve. Evening, I called from the booth. He grunted in response, making his way to the drinks cooler. As he bent to grab a Red Bull, something odd caught my eye. His shadow on the wall seemed wrong, longer than it should be, with strange protrusions from the head that looked almost like antlers. I blinked, and it was normal again. The trucker approached the booth, setting down the energy drink and a lighter. "Pump 4, he said, sliding across 2 20s. As I rang him up, I noticed a peculiar smell like wet fur and something burnt. I breathed through my mouth. "Long haul?" I asked, making conversation to distract myself. "Always is." His voice was gravel and smoke. "You're new." It wasn't a question. First night. He pocketed his change without counting it. "Won't be many." Before I could respond, he turned and walked out. Through the window, I watched him fuel his semi. His movements were stiff, mechanical. When he finished, he stared directly at the store for a long moment before climbing into his cab and pulling away. I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The digital clock on the register blinked to 2 a.m. "Things can get strange," Hank had said. I shook my head, trying to dislodge the unease that had settled at the base of my skull. Just road fatigue and poor lighting playing tricks. Nothing more. The bell jingled again. A woman stood in the doorway, her sundress white in the fluorescent light. She moved with an odd gliding step toward the jerky display, her back to me. Dark stains mottled the fabric of her dress oil, maybe, or... "Can I help you find something?" My voice sounded thin in the empty store. She turned slowly. Her face was ordinary enough, middle-aged, lined around the eyes and mouth, but something about her gaze made my skin prickle. She approached the booth, holding a package of beef jerky. "Just this," she said, her voice surprisingly melodic. As she slid the jerky toward me, our fingers almost touched. I caught a whiff of something rotten beneath flowery perfume. When I looked up to tell her the price, my words died in my throat. Her eyes had changed. The irises expanded, swallowing the whites, glowing a jaundiced yellow in the harsh light. Hank's first rule thundered in my head. "I'm sorry," I said, my mouth dry. "We're out of jerky." Her lips pulled back, revealing teeth too sharp, too numerous. "Don't lie to me, boy." Store policy, I managed. I can't sell this to you. The yellow in her eyes flared. For a moment, I thought she might try to break through the glass. Instead, she leaned closer, her breath fogging the partition. "You'll starve them," she hissed. Then she was gone, the bell marking her exit with a cheerful jingle that felt obscene after what I'd just seen. I sat frozen on my stool, heart hammering against my ribs. Outside, the pump stood silent under the buzzing lights. No sign of the woman or any vehicle. Had I imagined it? The yellow eyes, the teeth, the wrongness of her? I rubbed my face hard enough to see stars. Sleep deprivation. Had to be. I'd been working overtime at the garage before quitting to take this job, running on fumes for weeks. To steady myself, I began counting the register. The familiar ritual of sorting bills calmed my nerves. When I pulled out the tray to check for larger bills underneath, something caught my eye. The corner of a photograph. I tugged it free. A Polaroid, faded with age. It showed Hank, looking much younger, standing beside something that turned my stomach. The figure was humanoid but wrong too tall, too thin, its skin appearing to hang loosely, as if it didn't quite fit. Its face was blurred, either by motion or deliberate smudging. Written at the bottom in faded blue ink, "Feeding time, 1999. I flipped it over. Nothing. The boombox switched songs, the opening notes of Don't Fear the Reaper filling the silence. I quickly tucked the photo into my pocket, suddenly certain I wasn't meant to have seen it. Outside, the desert stretched endlessly under stars that seemed too bright, too close. For the first time, I noticed how the shadows pooled unnaturally around the base of the pumps, how the air seemed to waver above them like heat mirages, despite the cooling night. I checked the time. 2:33 a.m. Things can get strange. I still had a long way to go until dawn. The desert doesn't forget. My grandmother used to say that, back when I was small enough to sit on her lap. The desert remembers every footprint, every drop of blood, every secret whispered into its sands. I never understood what she meant until that night at Coyote Fuel and Go, when the darkness pressed against the windows like a living thing, hungry and patient. After finding the Polaroid, I couldn't settle. I paced the small store, straightening items that didn't need straightening, wiping counters that were already clean. Anything to keep moving, to push back against the stillness that had fallen over the station like a shroud. The clock read 3:17 a.m. when the payphone rang. The sound cut through Blue Oyster Cult like a knife, sharp and insistent. I froze mid-step. A bag of chips suspended between shelf and hand. The phone shouldn't be working. That's what Hank had implied, and his third rule echoed in my head. Never answer the payphone. It rang again, the bell inside it sounding somehow wet, as if the mechanism were coated in something thick and viscous. I set down the chips and approached it slowly. The blue plastic housing was covered in a fine layer of dust, undisturbed for what looked like years. Yet it rang, vibrating slightly with each shrill call. The phone rang. I stood before it, close enough to touch. No one knew I was here except Hank and Danny. It couldn't be for me. And yet, my hand moved of its own accord, reaching for the receiver. Hank's rules screamed in my mind, but a deeper curiosity pushed it aside. What harm could a phone call do? I lifted the receiver to my ear. At first, nothing but static, the kind that makes your fillings ache. Then, beneath it, a voice. Female, elderly, speaking through what sounded like gallons of water. "They're using you," it said, the words barely discernible through the interference. "The pumps aren't for gas." "Who is this?" I asked, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears, more static, rising and falling like ocean waves. Then, "Hank knows. Ask about his wife." "What about his wife?" "Who are you?" The static surged, a deafening roar that made me jerk the receiver away from my ear. When I cautiously brought it back, the voice had changed. Now it sounded like a child, high and sing-song. Miguel Reyes stole a car. Miguel Reyes broke the law. Miguel Reyes left his brother to fall. My blood turned to ice. No one here knew about that. No one except Danny. I slammed the receiver down, my hand trembling. The phone immediately began ringing again. I backed away, bumping into a rack of chips that clattered to the floor. The ringing continued, relentless, as I retreated to the safety of the booth. 5 rings. 10. 20. Then silence. So sudden it felt like a physical pressure against my eardrums. Outside, the lights above the pumps flickered, casting momentary shadows across the concrete. One of the shadows seemed to move independently, sliding along the ground like spilled oil before disappearing beneath pump number 4. I rubbed my eyes. Lack of sleep. Had to be. I'd been working double shifts at the garage for weeks before taking this job, trying to save up enough for Danny's rehab. My mind was playing tricks. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Danny had somehow gotten through despite the spotty service. Having weird dreams. Mom's voice coming from a coyote. Says you're lying about something. You okay? I stared at the message, a chill spreading through my chest. Our mother had been dead for 6 years, and I'd never told Danny the whole truth about the car I'd stolen, that I'd done it to pay off his dealer when Danny was too strung out to handle it himself, that I'd taken the fall because he was already on probation and would have gone to prison. Before I could respond, my phone died, the screen going black despite being nearly fully charged moments before. The booth suddenly felt too small, the air too thick. I needed to move. I stepped out cautiously, scanning the empty store. Nothing had changed, yet everything felt different. The shadows seemed deeper, the silence more complete. Even the boombox had gone quiet, though I hadn't touched it. I made my way to the front windows, peering out at the night. The highway stretched empty in both directions, a black ribbon cutting through darker terrain. No cars, no lights, nothing but the vast emptiness of the reservation at night. Something moved at the edge of my vision. I turned quickly, but the parking lot was empty, just the pumps standing like sentinels under the buzzing fluorescence. I was about to turn away when I noticed it. A dark liquid seeping from the base of pump number 4, spreading across the concrete in a widening pool. Not gas, something darker. Hank's second rule crashed into my consciousness. If the pumps leak black fluid, lock the doors and play track 3. I scrambled back to the booth, fumbling with the door lock controls. The electronic locks engaged with a heavy thunk that reverberated through the empty store. Then I moved to the boombox, hands shaking as I pressed the eject button. The cassette inside was unlabeled, the plastic case yellowed with age. I pushed it back in and hit play, then fast-forwarded to track 3. What emerged from the speakers wasn't music. It was a chant, low and rhythmic, in what I assumed was Navajo. The voice was male, elderly, repeating the same phrases over and over with increasing urgency. Beneath the voice was another sound, a constant, subtle scraping, like bone against stone. I returned to the window. The black fluid had stopped spreading, but now it was moving, contracting and expanding like something breathing. As the chant continued, the fluid began to retreat, pulling back toward the pump in defiance of gravity, flowing upward until it disappeared into the metal seams. The final notes of the chant faded, leaving behind a silence that felt expectant, as if the store itself were holding its breath. I ejected the tape with trembling fingers and returned it to its case. What the hell had I just witnessed? The rest of the night passed in a blur of hypervigilance. I jumped at every sound, the ice machine cycling, the refrigerators humming, the occasional distant howl that might have been wind or might have been something else entirely. No more customers came. I was grateful for that. Dawn arrived like a reprieve, pale light seeping across the horizon, illuminating the red mesas in the distance. I'd never been so happy to see the sun. The rumble of an approaching vehicle drew my attention. Hank's pickup pulled into the lot, dust billowing behind it. He looked unsurprised to find the doors locked, waiting patiently as I disengaged the security system. "How was your first night?" he asked as he entered, his eyes scanning my face. "Quiet," I lied, not ready to reveal what I'd experienced. "Just a couple of customers." He nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Till gets counted at shift change. You can head out once we're done." As we counted the register, I debated whether to mention the phone call or the leaking pump. Something held me back, a nagging suspicion that Hank already knew, that these rules of his weren't precautions but expectations. "Found something interesting last night," I said instead, pulling out the Polaroid. "Fell out when I was checking the register." Hank's expression didn't change, but his hand, reaching for the photo, hesitated almost imperceptibly. "Old Halloween photo," he said, taking it from me. "Me and a buddy dressed up. Must have been 20 years ago now. The caption says feeding time. Just a joke." He tucked the photo into his shirt pocket. "Halloween, you know. Spooky stuff." His explanation made sense, yet something in his tone rang false. Before I could press further, he pulled an envelope from his back pocket. "Almost forgot. Bonus for completing your first night." He handed it to me. Inside was a $100 bill. "We give these out for the first week. Helps with retention." The money felt like a bribe, though for what, I couldn't say. Still, I thought of Danny, of the rehab center's monthly fee, and pocketed the envelope. "Thanks. See you tonight?" Hank nodded. "Same time. Oh, and Miggs." He paused, his dark eyes unreadable. "If you used the bathroom last night, did you notice anything unusual? In the mirror, maybe?" The question caught me off guard. Number, should I have? He held my gaze a moment longer, then shook his head. Number just checking. Some of the previous guys complained about the lighting in there. Said it played tricks. Outside, the morning was already warming, the air shimmering above the asphalt. I sat in my car, key in the ignition, but didn't start it immediately. Instead, I pulled out my phone, now working again, and searched Skinwalker Navajo legend. The results made my stomach clench. Shapeshifters, Navajo witches who could take animal form, yellow eyes, unnatural movements, the ability to mimic voices of loved ones. I thought of the woman in the sundress, her eyes changing color, the trucker's shadow with its antler-like protrusions, the voice on the phone that knew things it shouldn't. Most disturbing were the accounts of Skinwalkers' preferred hunting grounds, isolated places, crossroads, areas where the boundary between worlds grew thin. Places exactly like Coyote Fuel and Go. I started the car, suddenly eager to put distance between myself and the station. As I pulled onto the highway, I glanced in my rearview mirror. For just a moment, I thought I saw something standing by pump number 4, a tall, thin figure watching me leave. I blinked, and it was gone. At home, I collapsed into bed without showering, exhaustion finally overtaking anxiety. My dreams were fragmented, uneasy red sand shifting beneath my feet, yellow eyes watching from darkness, Danny's voice calling from somewhere I couldn't reach. I woke to my phone ringing. The clock read 4:17 p.m. "Miggs? You there?" Danny's voice was tense. "Yeah, just woke up." I rubbed my face, trying to clear the fog of sleep. "You okay?" "Had another dream. The same one, but worse. She wasn't right, Miggs. Her face kept changing. She said you were in danger, that you were feeding something that shouldn't be fed." A chill ran through me despite the afternoon heat. "It's just a dream, Danny. The meds they give you there can cause weird dreams." "Maybe." He didn't sound convinced. "Just be careful, okay? That job, something feels off about it." After we hung up, I lay staring at the ceiling, Danny's words echoing in my mind. Something feels off about it. He had no idea how right he was. The smart thing would be to quit. Call Hank, make up an excuse, Never go back to that place with its strange rules and leaking pumps and impossible phone calls. But the reality of my situation hadn't changed. Danny's rehab wasn't cheap. My savings were nearly depleted. And jobs paying $30 an hour didn't come along every day, especially for ex-cons with nothing but mechanic skills and a GED. I thought of the $100 bonus in my pocket. 7 nights of this, 7 bonuses, plus the hourly wage. It would be enough to cover next month's rehab payment with some left over. I could handle 6 more nights. Whatever was happening at Coyote Fuel and Go, whatever games Hank was playing, I just needed to follow the rules and keep my head down. The desert doesn't forget, my grandmother used to say. But I wasn't part of this desert, this land with its ancient spirits and hungry shadows. I was just passing through, collecting a paycheck. At least, that's what I told myself as I prepared for my second night at Coyote Fuel and Go, where the pumps leaked darkness and the payphone rang with impossible voices. I was wrong, of course. So terribly wrong. You're the offering. The words came to me unbidden as I pulled into the Coyote Fuel and Go for my 7th night. My last shift. I'd made it through 6 nights of increasing strangeness, collecting my bonus each morning, saying nothing to Hank about the yellow-eyed customers or the moving shadows or the payphone that shouldn't work but did. Tonight would be different. I could feel it in the air, electric, charged, like the moments before a monsoon breaks. The sky above was clear, stars scattered across the darkness like salt on black velvet, but something was gathering, waiting. Hank's truck was already there when I arrived, unusual for our shift change. The station looked different somehow. The lights above the pumps seemed dimmer, their glow not quite reaching the edges of the concrete island. The windows reflected nothing, black squares in the cinder block walls. Even the neon coyote on the sign had gone dark, though the open 24 hours beneath it still buzzed with sickly fluorescent life. I grabbed my backpack and stepped out into the night. The air felt thick, resistant, as if I were wading through invisible syrup. Each step toward the door required more effort than it should have. The bell didn't jingle when I entered. It hung motionless above the door, though I felt the rush of air as the door swung shut behind me. "Hank?" I called. No answer. The store was empty, the usual hum of refrigerators and freezers conspicuously absent. The only sound was the soft tick of the analog clock above the register. I moved cautiously toward the booth, my footsteps echoing on the linoleum. The security monitor showed static instead of the usual grainy footage of pumps and parking lot. The register was open, empty of cash. "Hank?" I tried again. In the back, Miggs. His voice sounded wrong-stretched thin, like taffy pulled too far. The stockroom door stood ajar, a sliver of darkness beyond. As I approached, the smell hit me, metallic and organic, like raw meat left too long in the sun. I pushed the door open wider. Hank stood with his back to me, hunched over something on the metal table that normally held cleaning supplies. His silver hair was loose around his shoulders, longer than I remembered. His arms moved in rhythmic motions, as if he were kneading dough. "Hank? Everything okay?" He turned slowly. His face was the same weathered-lined, eyes deep-set beneath heavy brows, but his expression was one I'd never seen before. Hunger, naked and primal. "Right on time," he said, and his voice was his own again. "I was beginning to worry you might not show." "What's going on?" I asked, taking an involuntary step back. "Where's the cash for the register?" "Won't need it tonight." Hank wiped his hands on a rag, leaving dark smears I didn't want to identify. "No customers coming. Not the usual kind, anyway." I glanced at what lay on the table behind him. A clay figurine, roughly shaped like a coyote, its surface covered in symbols I didn't recognize. Beside it, a knife with a bone handle, its blade coated in something dark and viscous. "What is that?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. "Protection," Hank said simply. "And invitation." He moved toward me with surprising speed for a man his age. Before I could react, he had grabbed my arm, his grip like iron. "I've been watching you, Miggs. You're perfect. Strong heart, strong will." His eyes gleamed in the dim light. The others weren't right. Too weak, too scared. But you answered the phone. You saw the woman with yellow eyes and didn't run. You played the chant when the pumps bled. I tried to pull away, but his fingers only tightened. "Let go of me, Hank. Can't do that. Not tonight." He began pulling me toward the back door, the one I'd never seen used. It's the 7th night. Feeding time. I dug in my heels, but the floor seemed to tilt beneath me, aiding his efforts. The back door swung open of its own accord, revealing not a parking lot or alley, but a stretch of desert bathed in moonlight. Impossible. The stockroom backed up to a storage shed, not open land. "What the hell is this?" I demanded, real fear blooming in my chest. "The real coyote fuel," Hank said, dragging me through the doorway. "What's been here long before the gas station, before the highway, before any of us?" The desert night enveloped us. We stood in a circular clearing surrounded by red rock formations that I didn't recognize, though I'd driven this stretch of highway dozens of times. In the center of the clearing stood 4 metal poles arranged in a square, each one identical to the gas pumps out front, but stripped of their modern casing. They were ancient things, their surfaces covered in the same symbols as the clay coyote, metal so old it had developed a patina that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "This isn't real," I said, my voice sounding small in the vast space. "More real than anything you've known." Hank continued pulling me toward the pumps. "The station is just camouflage. Has been since my grandfather's time. The pumps don't dispense gas, Miggs. They take energy, life force, soul, whatever you want to call it. They keep them fed, keep them dormant." "Keep what dormant?" As if in answer, a howl rose from beyond the rock formations, not a coyote or wolf, but something that mimicked their call through a throat not designed for it. Another joined it, then another, until the night was filled with their chorus. "Skinwalkers," I whispered, the research I'd done coming back to me in a rush of terror. Hank nodded. This land was theirs once. Sacred ground, burial place for their kind. My ancestors made a deal. We provide regular offerings. They leave the people alone. We had reached the pumps. Up close, I could see they weren't metal at all, but bone-massive ancient bones shaped into pillars, the symbols carved deep into their yellowed surface. "The station sits on their burial ground," Hank continued, producing a length of chain from his pocket. "The pumps siphon travelers' blood, their essence, small amounts from many people, taken as they fill their tanks. Enough to keep the skinwalkers satisfied. But not anymore," I guessed, struggling as he began wrapping the chain around my wrist, securing it to one of the bone pumps. "The modern world," Hank spat. "Credit card readers at the pump, people paying at the terminal, never coming inside, fewer travelers stopping at all." He secured my other wrist. "The skinwalkers grow hungry. The small offerings aren't enough anymore. They want a feast." The chains felt impossibly cold against my skin, burning like dry ice. I pulled against them, but they held fast. "Why me?" I demanded. "Why not use yourself as your precious offering?" Hank's expression shifted to something almost like pity. "It doesn't work that way. My bloodline is bound to them as keepers, not food. Besides," he added, stepping back to survey his work, "they're hungry for young blood, strong blood. They're hungry for you, Miggs." "You're insane," I spat, still struggling against the chains. "They're hungry," Hank repeated, as if I hadn't spoken. "Your brother's too weak. I considered him first, you know, when he applied for the job, but the drugs had thinned his blood, made him unsuitable. You, though." He reached out to pat my cheek, a grotesque parody of affection. "You're the strong heart they need." A cold realization washed over me. "You were going to take Danny?" That's why you called me when he missed the interview? Hank shrugged. The Skinwalkers led me to your family. They have a way of finding what they need. The howls were closer now, accompanied by the soft padding of feet on sand. Shadows moved at the edge of the clearing, elongated and wrong, their proportions shifting as they circled. You don't have to do this, I said, desperation making my voice crack. Whatever deal your ancestors made, it's not your burden anymore. Let me go, and we'll both leave this place. Never come back. Hank shook his head. The desert doesn't forget, Miggs. And it doesn't forgive. He began backing away toward the door that still impossibly stood open to the stockroom. I'm sorry. If it helps, your sacrifice will save many others. The Skinwalkers will sleep again, satisfied. Hank! I shouted. But he had already retreated through the door. It swung shut behind him, vanishing completely and leaving only unbroken rock face where it had been. I was alone in the clearing with the bone pumps and the approaching shadows. Burn it all. The words surfaced in my mind with startling clarity as I stared at Hank through the truck's window. His weathered face was calm, patient, as if he had all the time in the world. Behind him, yellow eyes floated in the darkness like malevolent fireflies, watching, waiting. I had one advantage Hank didn't know about. One secret I'd kept during my week at Coyote Fuel and Go. I was a mechanic before I was anything else. While Hank spoke, his voice a dull murmur through the glass, my hand slid beneath the seat, fingers searching for what I knew would be there. Every truck driver keeps basic tools in their vehicle. Hank, meticulous as he was about his station, wouldn't be different. My fingers closed around cold metal. A tire iron. You need to accept this, Miggs, Hank was saying, his breath fogging the window between us. The Skinwalkers have chosen you. Fighting only makes it worse. I kept my expression neutral, my movements unhurried as I pulled the tire iron into my lap, concealing it with my forearm. If I come with you, I said, loud enough for him to hear through the glass. What happens to Danny? A flicker of surprise crossed Hank's face. Your brother? Nothing. This was never about him. You said you considered him first, that the Skinwalkers led you to my family. Hank nodded. They have a sense for suitable vessels, but once they tasted your essence through the pumps, they lost interest in him. You're the strong heart they need. I leaned closer to the window, as if considering his words. And if I refuse? If I don't come willingly? Then they take you anyway, Hank said simply. But they'll be angry, hungry. They might seek out Danny after all to punish your defiance. The threat ignited something in me, a cold, focused rage that cleared my head like nothing else could. I nodded slowly, making a show of resignation. Open the door, Miggs, Hank said, his voice gentler now. It'll be over quickly, I promise. I reached for the door handle with my left hand. With my right, I gripped the tire iron. The door swung open. Before Hank could react, I swung the tire iron with every ounce of strength I possessed, connecting with his temple. The impact made a sound like a melon splitting. Hank crumpled without a sound. The Skinwalkers reacted instantly, their howls rising into the night as they surged forward. I slammed the door shut, but not before I'd grabbed Hank's key ring from his belt. Among the keys was a small object, a clay token shaped like a coyote, identical to the one I'd seen on the table in the stockroom. I didn't have time to wonder about its significance. The Skinwalkers were on the truck now, their bodies slamming against the metal with enough force to rock the vehicle. Claws scrabbled at the windows, leaving frost-like patterns in their wake. One had climbed onto the roof, its distorted face appearing upside down in the windshield, yellow eyes blazing with hunger and rage. I jammed the key into the ignition, praying that whatever had killed the engine wasn't mechanical. The starter clicked weakly, the battery nearly drained. Come on, I muttered, trying again. Click. Nothing. A spiderweb crack appeared in the passenger window as something struck it with tremendous force. Another hit and the glass would give way. I tried the ignition one more time, pumping the gas pedal, though I knew it wouldn't help with a fuel-injected engine. The starter whined, then caught. The engine roared to life. I didn't hesitate. I threw the truck into drive and stomped on the accelerator. The vehicle lurched forward, tires spinning in the loose sand before finding purchase. The skinwalker on the roof tumbled off, its shriek cut short as it disappeared from view. The headlights illuminated nothing but empty desert ahead, but in the distance, I could make out the faint glow of artificial light. The highway, civilization, safety. I drove recklessly, bouncing over rocks and scrub brush, the truck's suspension groaning in protest. In the rearview mirror, I could see the skinwalkers giving chase, their unnatural bodies allowing them to move with impossible speed. But they couldn't match the truck at full throttle. Gradually, they fell behind, their glowing eyes diminishing to pinpricks in the darkness. The glow on the horizon grew stronger. I was getting closer to the highway, to escape. Then I saw it, a familiar silhouette against the night sky. The neon coyote of Coyote Fuel and Go, its red outline flickering like a dying heartbeat. Impossible. I had been driving away from the station, not toward it. Yet there it was, growing larger in my headlights. The pumps emerged from the darkness, then the store itself, windows dark and empty. I slammed on the brakes, the truck skidding to a halt in the gravel lot. This couldn't be happening. I had driven straight away from the clearing, toward the highway. There was no way I could have circled back to the station, unless the desert itself was working against me, bending space to keep me trapped. The desert doesn't forget, Hank had said, and it doesn't forgive. I sat paralyzed, engine idling, as the implications sank in. If I couldn't escape by driving away, what options did I have left? The payphone inside the store began to ring. Even from the truck, I could hear its shrill, insistent call. The same phone that had spoken to me in a voice like drowning, warning me about the pumps. They're using you. The pumps aren't for gas. I looked down at the clay token in my hand, turning it over to examine the symbols carved into its surface. They matched the markings I'd seen on the bone pumps in the clearing. Some kind of binding symbol, perhaps? A focus for whatever magic kept the skinwalkers tied to this place? The payphone continued to ring, demanding attention. Against all better judgment, I found myself opening the truck door, stepping out into the night. The air was unnaturally still, not even a whisper of wind disturbing the silence between rings. I approached the store cautiously, half expecting Hank to appear in the doorway. But the entrance remained dark and empty. The bell didn't jingle when I pushed the door open. It hung motionless, as it had earlier that night. The payphone's ring grew louder as I entered, echoing in the empty store. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting jumping shadows across the linoleum floor. The shelves stood fully stocked, the refrigerators humming quietly. Everything appeared normal, yet nothing felt right. The air inside was too thick, too warm, as if the store were breathing. I approached the payphone slowly, each step requiring conscious effort. The receiver vibrated slightly with each ring, an object possessed of unnatural life. I lifted it to my ear. Hello? Static, then a voice. The same elderly female voice I'd heard before, speaking through what sounded like gallons of water. Throw it in the flames. What? The token, Hank's token. Throw it in the flames, and the binding breaks. Who are you? I demanded. A pause, then. I was Hank's wife. A chill ran through me. The skinwalker in the clearing, the one that had dragged Hank away. It had worn a woman's face. His wife's face? You're one of them, I said. I was human once, the voice replied. Before Hank's grandfather sacrificed me to them. Before I became the first keeper. I don't understand. The Yazzie family doesn't just tend the pumps, Miguel. They become them eventually. Hank's time was ending. He needed a replacement. You. My grip tightened on the receiver. Why are you helping me? Because 70 years is long enough. The voice grew fainter, the static increasing. Burn it all. Free us." The line went dead. I stood frozen, the receiver still pressed to my ear, trying to process what I'd heard. Hank hadn't just been selecting a sacrifice, he'd been choosing his replacement. Another keeper to tend the pumps, to feed the skinwalkers with the essence of travelers. And his wife, or what remained of her, wanted me to end it. Throw it in the flames. I looked down at the clay token in my hand. If what the voice said was true, this object was key to breaking whatever bound the skinwalkers to this place. But what flames? The desert night was cool and still, no fire in sight. Then I remembered my first instinct when I'd found myself back at the station. Burn it all. I was a mechanic. I knew how engines worked, how fuel systems operated, and I knew that beneath the concrete islands where the pumps stood, massive tanks held thousands of gallons of gasoline. My plan formed with crystalline clarity. I returned to Hank's truck and drove it directly to pump number 4, the one that had leaked black fluid, the one I'd been chained to in the clearing. I positioned the vehicle so that its gas tank was aligned with the pump, then retrieved the tire iron from the cab. Working quickly, I used the iron to pry open the pump's maintenance panel. Inside was a tangle of wires and tubes, the modern disguise for something far older. I could feel it now, a subtle vibration, a wrongness that emanated from the pump's core. Beneath the plastic and metal housing lay bone, ancient and hungry. I disconnected the safety shutoff valve, the mechanism that prevented gasoline from flowing when no one was actively pumping. Then I jammed the nozzle trigger with the gas cap from Hank's truck, creating a continuous flow. Gasoline began pouring onto the concrete, spreading in a widening pool around the pump. I repeated the process with the other 3 pumps, working methodically despite the growing sense of urgency. The skinwalkers would return soon. They would sense what I was doing. When all 4 pumps were gushing gasoline, I retreated to the store. The smell of fuel was overwhelming, burning my nostrils and making my eyes water. I needed something to create a spark, something that would ignite the gasoline from a safe distance. Behind the counter, I found Hank's cigarettes and a book of matches, but striking a match and throwing it wouldn't give me enough time to get clear of the blast. I needed a delay. My gaze fell on my wristwatch, an old-fashioned wind-up with a metal case and band. The battery in the truck's key fob was too small, but the watch, if I could create a short circuit with the watch battery and something metallic, it might generate enough heat to ignite the gasoline fumes. I removed the watch and pried open the back with the tire iron, extracting the small battery. Then I found a paper clip in the register drawer and straightened it out. By connecting the positive and negative terminals of the battery with the metal clip, I could create a short circuit. The paper clip would heat up rapidly, eventually becoming hot enough to ignite the gasoline-soaked paper towel I wrapped around it. A crude time bomb, giving me perhaps 30 seconds to get clear. I placed the device at the edge of the spreading pool of gasoline, making sure the paper towel was thoroughly soaked. Then I stood, the clay token clutched tightly in my hand. "Throw it in the flames," the voice had said. Not yet. First, I needed flames. I ran back to the truck, started the engine, and reversed away from the pumps, tires squealing on the wet concrete. I didn't stop until I reached the highway, positioning the vehicle for a quick escape. From this distance, I could see the entire station, the 4 pumps leaking gasoline, the store with its flickering lights, the neon coyote sign casting its red glow over everything. It looked almost peaceful, an oasis of light in the desert darkness. Then the makeshift bomb ignited. The flash came first, a blue-white burst that momentarily turned night to day. Then the sound, a deep whoomp that I felt in my chest more than heard. The gasoline caught instantly, flames racing along the concrete in 4 directions at once, converging on the pumps. For a moment, nothing else happened. The pumps burned, wreathed in orange flames that sent black smoke billowing into the night sky. Then pump number 4 exploded. The blast knocked me back against the truck, the concussion wave hitting like a physical blow. Heat washed over me, intense enough to singe my eyebrows. Debris rained down, chunks of concrete, twisted metal, fragments of bone. The other pumps followed in rapid succession, each explosion more violent than the last. The underground tanks ignited, turning the entire station into a roaring inferno. The store's windows blew out, glass shards glittering like diamonds as they caught the firelight. The roof collapsed inward, consumed by hungry flames. As I watched the destruction, a sound rose above the roar of the fire, a chorus of howls, filled with rage and pain. Dark shapes materialized at the edge of the firelight, pacing back and forth, but unable or unwilling to approach the flames. Skinwalkers, dozens of them, their yellow eyes reflecting the fire like evil stars. The clay token grew hot in my hand, vibrating with the same frequency as the howls. I understood then this object was their anchor, the physical manifestation of whatever bound them to this place. And I held their fate in my palm. "Throw it in the flames," the voice had said. I stepped forward, feeling the intense heat of the fire on my face. The skinwalkers saw what I intended. Their howls rose to a fevered pitch, and several broke from the pack, rushing toward me with unnatural speed. I drew back my arm and threw the token with all my strength. It arced through the smoke-filled air, spinning end over end, before disappearing into the heart of the inferno. For a heartbeat, nothing changed. Then the fire shifted. The flames turned from orange to blue-white, rising in a perfect column that pierced the night sky. The heat intensified, becoming almost unbearable even from my position by the highway. The skinwalkers screamed, not howls now, but human screams of agony and release. Their bodies began to dissolve, flesh and bone turning to ash that swirled upward in the superheated air. One by one, the yellow eyes winked out until only the fire remained, burning with unnatural intensity. I stumbled back to the truck, my lungs burning from smoke and exertion. As I pulled onto the highway, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The pillar of fire illuminated the desert for miles around, a beacon visible to anyone within 50 miles. By morning, there would be nothing left of Coyote Fuel and Go but a scorched foundation, and questions no one would be able to answer. I drove east, away from the fire, away from the skinwalkers, away from Hank and his terrible legacy. The adrenaline that had carried me through the night began to ebb, leaving me shaking and nauseated. Cuts and burns I hadn't even noticed stung with sudden intensity. My wrists were raw where the chains had bound them. But I was alive. I had escaped, and I had ended whatever ancient horror had been playing out at Coyote Fuel and Go for generations. 1 week later, Danny was released from rehab, clear-eyed and sober for the first time in years. I told him a version of the truth, that there had been an accident at the station, that I'd barely escaped the fire, that I needed a fresh start somewhere far from the desert. We drove west on Interstate 10, the car packed with everything we owned, which wasn't much. California seemed as good a destination as any, a place where the past couldn't follow us, where the desert's long memory couldn't reach. Danny fiddled with the radio as we crossed the state line, finally settling on a station playing Navajo folk music. The melody was hauntingly familiar, the same rhythm as track 3, the chant that had driven back the black fluid from the pumps. But this version was peaceful, the singer's voice clear and untroubled. In the rearview mirror, the desert shrunk behind us. For the first time in years,